Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Alex, and today we are diving deep into a topic that affects every single person who manages money, owns a business, or makes investment decisions. The subtle yet devastating cost of relying on your gut feeling. Joining me to dissect this is Dr. Ben Carter, a behavioral finance expert and market analyst. Ben, thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here, Alex. This is a conversation I think every modern investor needs to have, whether they're a seasoned pro or just starting out.
I love that because we're constantly told in popular culture to trust your instincts, right? That intuition is this heroic, almost mystical force. But when we apply that fast, emotional, survival-based thinking to the complex, cold world of finance, the source material argues that it becomes a villain. Why is that specific mismatch so costly?
That's the core of the problem, Alex. Intuition, or what we call heuristics in psychology, is essential for everyday life. It helps you drive, recognize a face, or react instantly to danger. It's Daniel Kahneman's System 1 thinking, fast, automatic, and emotional. But the market financial operates on completely different rules. It's slow, statistical, and driven by macroeconomics, corporate balance sheets, and policy decisions from the Fed or the ECB.
So when you have that hunch that a stock is about to bottom out, or you panic sell everything because the market is dropping, you're essentially using a caveman survival tool to navigate a complex, highly mathematical environment.
Exactly. You're trying to use speed where you desperately need depth of analysis. And that speed, that quick shortcut, is inherently vulnerable to biases that distort reality.
Let's talk about two of the most insidious biases highlighted in the analysis. First, the availability heuristic. What is it, and how does it drain an investor's capital?
The availability heuristic is simple. We tend to overestimate the probability of recent or easily recalled events. Think about that story we all have, the colleague or the neighbor who made a 500% return on a speculative asset in 1 month. That anecdote is instantly vivid and available in your mind.
Right, so you're basing a multi-thousand-dollar investment decision not on the asset's fundamentals or technical data, but on a single, exciting success story that's easy to remember.
Precisely. The consequence is that you ignore historical volatility, you bypass proper risk management, and you act impulsively. You get in at the wrong time, often at the peak of excitement, and then you face significant losses when the inevitable correction happens.
That leads perfectly into the second major trap, confirmation bias. This is where we actively filter the world to see only what we want to see.
It's the human default, isn't it? If your gut tells you the housing market is about to crash, you will only read the pessimistic or bearish reports. You'll instantly dismiss a well-founded report from a highly respected institution if it offers an optimistic view. The critical question here is, are you reading an economic report to learn or simply to validate a decision you've already made in your mind?
Oh, that hits home. So how do we introduce that necessary logical friction? How do we force System 2, the slow, deliberate, logical part of our brain, to engage?
You have to build a checklist of denial. Before any significant financial move, you must intentionally seek out and critically analyze 2 or 3 authoritative articles or reports that argue the opposite case to your gut feeling. If your gut says buy, you must read the best arguments for sell. If you can survive that logical friction, then your decision is starting to be grounded in judgment, not just impulse.
Historical lesson and practical application. The source material points to the 2008 Great Recession as a colossal failure of collective intuition. It's a perfect case study for us. Can you break down what happened when intuition defeated data?
Absolutely. The collective intuition, the generalized irrational belief, was that U.S. national house prices never go down. This belief became a euphoric, self-fulfilling prophecy fueled by greed. It completely disregarded the massive blinking red lights of data, the rising debt, the systemic leverage, the declining credit standards in the subprime mortgage market.
And the people who succeeded, like Michael Burry, were the ones who ignored the euphoria and stuck to the cold, hard, unsexy data.
Exactly. The lesson is that collective intuition, or market euphoria, is often the greatest indicator of imminent risk. When everyone feels rich, that's precisely the moment to review your data with the most extreme skepticism.
So, moving from that historical lesson to action, what is the single most valuable, actionable process you can give our listeners to replace intuition with data?
I recommend implementing the three-step data validation process for any significant investment. First, raw data collection. Get fundamental data, PE ratios, GDP, corporate balance sheets, from an authoritative source, not a blog, not a tweet. Second, historical contrast. Compare that current data point with its historical 5 or 10-year average. Is the current inflation rate, for example, outside the normal range? If it is, you must proceed with extreme caution. And third, the most important, sensitivity analysis. Ask yourself, what if my hunch is completely wrong? Model the results of the worst-case scenario. If you can survive that worst-case scenario, you have a solid decision backed by risk management.
Emotional insights, panic, greed, and the twin biases. That analysis is how you build rational confidence instead of just emotional impulse. But we can't ignore the feelings. What are the two market emotions that most often hijack our System 2 thinking?
It's always fear, panic, and greed, FOMO. Fear is the fight or flight response. You see a negative news report and your instinct screams, sell now before you lose everything. A disciplined investor, however, asks, have the business fundamentals actually changed? Is the company still profitable? If the fundamentals are solid, that panic-induced drop is often a buying opportunity. Panic is simply uncontrolled intuition.
And greed is the opposite, the fear of missing out. You jump in because everyone is making money, ignoring the price and the risk.
And these feed two other critical intuitive biases, anchoring and loss aversion. Anchoring is when you cling to the first price you paid for an asset. If you bought a stock at $100 and it drops to $50, your gut says, I'm not selling it until it gets back to $100. You are anchored to that entry price, ignoring the current market reality.
And loss aversion is the reason why that anchoring is so painful.
Exactly. Kahneman and Tversky proved that the pain of a loss is psychologically twice as intense as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Intuition compels you not to realize the loss, forcing you to hold a losing investment indefinitely, waiting for a hypothetical return to the purchase price, while your capital is tied up and missing out on other opportunities. That's the opportunity cost of emotional intuition.
Conclusion and actionable next steps. Ben, this has been incredibly insightful. If you could leave our listeners with one core takeaway to implement starting today, what would it be?
It would be to adopt the investment journal habit. Intuition is fleeting. It leaves no record. Judgment is nourished by error, but only if you document it.
How does that look in practice?
Keep a simple journal. Record your hunch, intuition, next to your rational decision, expertise. For example, hunch, buy stock X because it feels cheap, versus rational decision, buy stock X because its PE ratio is 8, which is historically low, and its cash flow is positive. Then record the result. Over time, your own personal track record will show you that the evidence-based decision wins, and your brain will learn to discount the emotional impulse. You turn intuition into structured expertise.
That's brilliant. Your next financial decision must be a conscious act of will, where the GPS of data overrides the blurry map of emotion. Dr. Ben Carter, thank you so much for sharing your expertise on how we can build true financial authority.
Thank you, Alex. It was a great conversation.
And to all our listeners, we'll see you next time.